Very good morning to you, dear brothers and sisters in Christ. I hope you can hear me clearly. Catholic Business Network, CBN, is happy to present to you our first My Journey series talk in 2020. We were unable to hold any physical talks so far this year due to COVID-19, and hence we decided to do an online version instead. This talk is being conducted via Zoom webinar and is also being live streamed on CBN's YouTube and Facebook channels. Our speaker for today is Lawrence Chong, Group CEO of Consulus, a global innovation consultancy firm. Lawrence will share his testimonial and how God has been a light in his life's journey as an entrepreneur. He will share about his ups and downs in building Consulus, which is now a global firm present in 16 countries. For those who do not know about CBN, we were set up in 2008 by a group of Catholic business folks and professionals to help people live their faith in the workplace and also to serve the community. We have recently revamped our vision and vision to make it more meaningful. Our vision is inspiring faith at work, and our mission is serving Christ to transform our workplace. And how do we do this? We live up to this vision mission through our various programs, such as the Christ at Work conference, which is done once every 2 years, the My Journey series, talks like this one that we're having right now, the leadership series, career counseling, an annual Lenten retreat, and we also do fun-filled social and networking activities such as our annual CBN Golf Classic event, as well as our annual Christmas dinner, where we also raise funds for both CBN and for other charitable causes. So let's move on to the agenda for today. We'll start off with an opening prayer, followed by Lawrence's talk for about 60 minutes. We'll then do a Q&A for roughly 30 minutes, and we are taking questions only on the Zoom webinar, so please submit your questions using the Zoom Q&A, which you can enter in all your questions. We'll try and address as many as we can, and then we'll wrap up with a few announcements before we close. So the whole thing should take about 1.5 hours to a little more. So let's begin with our opening prayer. Just give me a second. Okay, so this is a prayer that CBN has adopted. You will also find it on our website. So please join me in saying this prayer. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord God, praise to you, King of the universe. You have made the world for all men and women to live in. In all our dealings at work or business, grant us light to know the needs of our fellow men and women, and give us strength to make wise decisions for the benefit of all. Do not let self-interest or greed influence us, for you have chosen us to be Catholic men and women at work to serve your people. Bless us as we work in our respective workplaces. Guide our minds and hearts always to inspire faith at work. Help us work for the good of our community to transform our workplace. Glory be to you, Father of light, living as Lord and ruler forever and ever. Amen. And so let's begin the talk with Lawrence. I now hand you over to Lawrence for his sharing.
Hi everyone, my name is Lawrence Chong. I serve as CEO of Consulars, and I'm very glad to be able to share my personal journey with you. So together with Catholic Business Network, I hope this experience will be useful, and I look forward to the conversations that we will have soon after this sharing. First off, just to share a bit about myself. I grew up in a middle-class family. It was always a very happy and joyful family. My father came from Malaysia. He found purpose and work here. He was a contractor for one of the local shipyard. And the other interesting thing is that my dad, he's a serial entrepreneur. And I remember that one of the fun things that my sister and I used to do was my father decided to start a circus. And we stayed on the circus, and we were moving around with all these animals, tigers and elephants, and we had a really fun time moving around. And so I would say that I had the joy of being part of this great experience of adventure ever since young. And the other part of my childhood that I remember very fondly was my parish church. The Church of St. Anthony was in Mandai then. It was next to the zoo. So you can tell that I've a bit of a luck with being near animals, you could say. But what was most beautiful about this community, St. Anthony, was it was a very small Catholic community where you really feel this intimacy and sense of family. And I knew practically everyone, and everybody knew everyone's kid. And so I was really nurtured, and I grew up in this family atmosphere. I would say that really my life changed in my teenage years. I was really very inquisitive about the Bible. I was reading the Acts of the Apostles, and I was being very inspired by what I read. But at that time, I didn't really understand, or didn't really think that it would still be possible to have that kind of experience. Then I met this international Catholic movement called Focolare, which means fireplace. And they have this beautiful vision of living the gospel based on the passage of John 17:21, may they all be one. And through living this life of unity, they would like to bring about a united world in God's vision. And I remember at the time, of course, I was in a middle-class family, and they invited me to a gathering in Rome for young teenagers. I obviously didn't have the money to go, and they said that they managed to find Providence, and somebody actually raised money for me to be able to go and partake in this international event for teenagers. And I remember it was an eye-opener for me, because I was young, and there was this very modern way of presenting the gospel. They ran it like a concert where they had sharing of experiences about how they live the gospel concretely, how they love their neighbor, and how they started to organize even activities to help the poor, and how they were involved in public campaigns for peace. And they were like 14, 15, and I was thinking to myself that I could do the same like them, in order to live and be courageous enough to live the gospel, but in a way that this living the gospel is not just to be a good Catholic, but this living the gospel is about changing the world. Then one particular thing that touched me was when I was at this event, which they called something like a super congress. A group of German teenagers came up to me and said, "Hey, are you from Singapore?" I said, "Yes, I am." And "Are you Lawrence?" I said, "Yes, I am." I said, "Oh, we're so happy to meet you, because we were the ones raising money for you." And they explained how they raised money for me. They took care of a few chickens that lay eggs, and they took these eggs, they bring it to the market every single day for a couple of months in order to raise the equivalent of contribution in order to finance my ticket to Rome. And I was really touched. I thought to myself, who would do something like that, to raise money for someone they have never met? And that's when I realized that this idea of living the gospel is not abstract. It's not something that we just hear on a Sunday Mass, but it's something that we can live. And as I met more and more people in this international movement, I met very unique individuals, and one of this person who inspired me was Silvio Daniel, and he was this vivacious and joyful Italian man who was always full of ideas. I remember when I was a teenager listening to his sharing, because he was based in Philippines and he was based in Thailand, about how, you know, every single person he met, he will entrust to God, and how he will try to love everyone regardless of faith, and how because of all this, there will be many miracles that happen. For example, once he didn't have money for a return ticket, he only had a one-way ticket, and he was entrusting that intention to God, that hopefully he can get enough funds for a return ticket to go back to where he came from. And because he just focused on loving without asking for money, someone actually offered him the equivalent amount so that he could buy a return ticket to go back. So these kind of examples really formed my teenage years. And another experience that was very concrete was, I was in another international gathering once, and there was this young professional. He was sitting next to me, and then we were just sharing our faith and things like that. And one thing he said struck me. He said that because he has given his life to God, one day he was promoted to be a vice president of a bank. However, after he got promoted, the very next day he was asked to be posted from one city in the US to go to another city. And I said, but how? You know, you just got promoted, shouldn't you stay? And he told me, no, my choice is God first. And so he shared with me that he actually had to go to his boss and say that, look, I'm grateful for the promotion, but I have a greater mission, and I have to decline this offer because I have to be transferred to another city. And this kind of experience, and later on when I met him a number of years later, that's him, the guy in the middle, Bob, really touched me to say that it is possible to have a professional life and also be greatly radical in living the gospel. And I think as I grew up in the teenage years, I obviously was very involved in the parish of St. Anthony. And in the parish of St. Anthony, we started this youth group that is linked to the international movement of the Focolare. And I had many opportunities to build a very big and shared experience with youth from Singapore and youth from Malaysia. And this is one of the youth camps that we did in Penang. And I think as part of that growing up experience, some of the things that really form you in life is really about how do you understand whether some things are part of the plan of God or not. And I remember once we had to raise money in order to go for a gathering. And again, while we in Singapore, we have sufficient, our friends in other countries like Indonesia especially, they don't have enough. And you know, we needed to raise $12,500 in order to help finance our friends from Indonesia and other countries in Southeast Asia to go for this event. And we had to do it in 3 months' time. And you know, being Singaporean, right, you know, we are very practical, and we will always say, you know, how is this actually possible? Nobody raised $12,500 just like that, and we were just youth, right? And I remember one of the youth advisors who accompanied us, he said to me that, Lawrence, if it is the will of God and we do our part, then it will happen. And I remember we went to a parish in Singapore to ask them for permission to use their grounds in order to organize a food and fun fair so that we could raise this amount. And the parishioners asked us, okay, so you feel free, you know, to use the place, but how much are you trying to raise? And we said, well, we need to raise $12,500. And the person literally laughed. I said, well, even in our usual parish feast days, we don't raise above that amount, right? We raise like 9,000 or 10,000. They say good luck. So we went ahead anyway. We did the event, and I still remember that at the end of that day where we had the food and fun fair, the exact amount came in, $12,500. So this kind of this kind of very, very concrete formative experience about trying to find out whether it's His will, and then trying to understand His will, and then things happen, really stayed in my heart, and really affected me as I grew up and eventually start a business. And so one of the interesting thing about this international movement called Focolare is it was founded by Chiara Lubick. And when she founded the movement, she was extremely young. And so you could say that this is a movement founded by young girls who had nothing but this great desire to love God and to make Him known to the ends of the earth. And I was just fascinated by her entire journey. Like, she was the first Christian woman to share about her personal experience of how Christ inspired her life in the mosque, and she was the first Christian lady who went to a Buddhist monastery in Thailand and to share with Buddhist monks about her own personal journey in how she understood the will of God for her was to bring about a united world. And just the way she managed to bring people together, like people from different sides who may not always agree, and to try to get them to think about coming together inspired by God. That means everyone is called to love, because everyone is a son and daughter of God. And that audacity, that willingness, that courage really informed me as I was growing up, learning from all these experiences. And I remember that in 1997, when she came to Thailand, I had the opportunity to go to Thailand and to attend the talk that she was giving. And then at one moment, I had the chance to meet her together with my friend. And when I met her and I said to her that our ambition is to really bring about a united world in Singapore, and she just replied like this. She said that, "I know, and I'm waiting." So this mix of courage, this mix of this living the gospel, and things happen, amazing things happen, really shaped my life and convinced me that following God is always the right thing to do. So when I was growing up after the teenage years, I was very involved in church. I was doing almost everything in the church ministry. I was an altar server, I was a lector, I was a choir, I was in the parish council. So you name it, I've done it, and I've been in the parish for almost all my life since I was a kid. And so the natural thing to do at that time was to think that I would like to consider and want to work towards being a priest. And I was a little bit ambitious. I was planning, I think I'll make quite a good priest, a young priest. And I wanted to join the seminary very early. And kind of like people also had the kind of expectations because I was so involved in church. And I remember that I was going through the process, but it wasn't meant to be, because at a certain point, friends started to gather around me, and this entire entrepreneurship journey began. And I didn't understand, because I didn't have any money. I didn't start with all I had was friends, and friends who believed in what I was saying, but I wasn't even sure myself. But what I was very sure was I wanted to do the will of God. So just to share a short experience to express how the business came about. So when you are young, right, you are crazy and you try to do all sorts of things, but you don't really have a clue. But what I knew I didn't want to do is I didn't want to be dishonest. I wanted to be very frank about how I see any business should be. I wanted to make sure that we are doing it for the right reasons. And I studied design. And in the early days, this is like early 2000, when people tend to do design, a designer's work is basically, in those days, was very much like a contractor's work. You come up with ideas and you hope that the client will understand you, and then they'll buy into your work. But it was not really a process whereby you do it on the basis of good strategy and good solutions. It was just creation of ideas, and hopefully it will catch fire with the client. So in those days, when we started the business, we insisted that we don't want to just give an idea. We wanted to understand why the idea was needed. And that was tough because in those days, people won't pay for something like that. They would just ask you to draw, they would just ask you to come up with the concept before they pay you. And I remember we tried to go with this idea. It didn't really work out. It's like 6 months into trying to set up. And I had already friends who were following me on this journey. They were not getting paid. We were not getting any money. And we were, you know, trying to make this business work. And at that moment, I was thinking, great. So this is not working out. Looks like it's going to be a big distraction to prevent me from becoming a priest. So you see, I'm right. I'm supposed to be a priest. So there was this meeting, a presentation with one of the largest confectionery company in Singapore. And I was saying that, look, this attempt to start the business has been going on too long. And so I was praying to God, and especially in my room, there was a statue of Mary. And I was saying to Mother Mary, I said, look, Mother, I really, really need to know whether I'm going to be a priest or not. So if this presentation fails, I know I'm going to pack my bags and I'm going to go to the seminary. So I went for this presentation to present to the owner what we would do. And if anybody has been in design, you know that you usually cannot go empty-handed in those days. You have to go with a ready concept, but we didn't. We just went to the company. We said that, look, we first need to study how your company works. We need to study how you do your cakes. We need to know why your people believe in you. And this is the entire process before we come up with the design. After I did that short presentation to the business owner for about 20 minutes, I paused. And then I asked her, does she have any question? She looked at me and she looked at the manager, you know, who sort of allowed us to come into the presentation. And she just asked me like any typical business person in Singapore. And she asked, can I have a discount? And I remember clearly in my head that moment. I said that, no, I'm not going to give a discount because I want to know whether I was going to be a priest. So the fee at the time was $60,000. And I said, I'm sorry, we cannot give a discount. So she looked at me and she looked at the manager and she looked at me again and she said yes. And she left the room. And I was absolutely stunned because I didn't know what happened. Then I asked the manager and I said, what happened? You know, what did she say? What did she mean by that? And the manager said to me, congratulations, you got the job and we can start work. And I asked, is it normal for your boss to agree to award a contractor or a consultant a $60,000 business based on the first meeting? And he said, no, actually you are the first one, right? So that experience again took off in unexpected ways. And of course now the rest is history, and you know, from that project it's been 16 over years. And what I understood was that in every organization, there's always this great desire to find out about purpose. And once we manage to help any organization discover their purpose, that is when they are best able to bring people together. And this has been an incredible journey. I mean, I've been invited to speak about this formula of purpose and unity that brings about innovation and growth. And being able to do different projects from healthcare to also helping a Catholic university find its purpose, and in order to bring people together again, has been a real thrill and a real excitement. And of course also being able to inspire the industry at large in order to discover more about itself has been an incredible journey. And I think that more than that, what I did not expect is to be able to find a bigger family out there that also share in this vision of being true to your values, being true to yourself in order to be able to change the world. So I think as part of as the company grew, and also I think over the process when God is somewhat your business partner as well, there are formative experiences that help to form you in terms of thinking, and I think those early experiences was very helpful to us. I remember that in the early days, cash flow was difficult, and we were all trying to secure projects, of course, in order to pay the bills and take care of everyone. And we worked very hard on every single project. Like, we can't afford to lose any single project. And I think that there was one particular experience whereby we worked very hard on a proposal, and we got it. But just before we started, the client said that, look, I know a lot of people in government, and I know this project is worth $100,000. Is it possible if you can sort of like inflate the fee, but I only need to pay you $100,000? And that was really a bad moment for us, because that was almost one of the largest projects that we were going after at that time in the early days, and we had to make conscious decision whether to do it or not. And I'm just glad that in building this business, I managed to partner with people that have values. We are not all Catholics. I was a Catholic, another partner was a Methodist, another partner is a Muslim, but we all believe in doing the right thing. Then we decided not to continue with the project, but it's easier said than done, because you're losing $100,000 that you've been chasing for 4 months, right? And then this thing happens, and then you have to drop it. And I remember that even after we said it, we were fearful about how we will survive, because we could close shop the next month. And just as we were going through this fear of losing everything, one business chamber that we were working with at that time, they called us and urgently and say, hey, Lawrence, we have a project that is rather urgent, and we need counselors to get involved and work with us on it. It's for this German company, and eventually the project, we got it, and the amount was exactly $100,000. And so what it tells you is that there were so many moments of such tests. I wouldn't say God is trying to test us, but like God is trying to form us, so that whatever we do, we will always have this framework to do, and to always have confidence in His justice and in His providence. And I also remember that there was another moment we were going for a very large project. This time it was $1.5 million fee in terms of commission, and we were competing with two larger companies, and we were small and the others were ginormous, right? And the interesting thing is that we didn't have much of a track record, but what we had was a strategy and a heart. And they wanted to put the three of us to the test, and they gave us an assignment. They said, like, look, if you really want this project, do this campaign for us. And this campaign needs to be about how do you encourage people to do savings, and you do it via lucky draw. Well, this bank was an Islamic bank, and because I have a Muslim partner, and we understand the precepts of the principles of Islam, and something like this based on chance is not really very encouraged, because in Islam it's about merit, it's not about chance. And when they give us a brief, we actually told them that, look, I don't think the lucky draw is a great idea. What about if we really try to do an educational campaign to find out what people really believe in, why are they saving for, and to do a different kind of campaign. And after we said that, we didn't hear a response. And I remember it was strange that we had the courage to give them an alternative suggestion to do the right thing instead of just doing whatever they told us. And I remember that I was still frightened, even though we had the courage, because remember I was sharing that I always wanted to do the kind of projects based on values and principles. So it's interesting, right? So I told my partners, because one is a Muslim, so he prays on Friday. My Methodist partner goes to church, Wesley, on Saturday, and I go to Mass on Sunday, right? So we told each other, you pray Friday, you pray Saturday, and I'll do Sunday. But still, we didn't hear any feedback from the client for 1 week. But at the end of the 1 week, a long 1 week, they called us back and they went like, Lawrence, we thought about it and you are right. We'll do it your way. We won't do a lucky draw. We'll do an educational campaign. And that campaign, because we did it so well, they gave us the $1.5 million project. And just to say that it is so beautiful to be able to be honest about your beliefs in faith, because that also attracts your other business partners who share those values, that allows us to also be able to work with a company. I mean, the Islamic Bank, they also very much believe in values. And I sort of look back and I go like, if we weren't so committed to our beliefs and our values, we would have lost the project. I mean, there were two other competitors, they were much more bigger than us, but because they were not so pronounced about their values, I think we had an advantage there because they felt our sincerity. And I think one of the things that really really helped me to be humble and to really realize that everything has been because of God's grace and providence is last year when we celebrated our 15th anniversary, and we decided to write a short book to trace our steps. And Karen Lubick, the founder of the Folklore movement, used to say that, every one of us, we will be able to notice the trace of God's will in our lives. It's like a golden thread. And if we have tried to live, we have tried to follow His will, we'll see God's plan. And it was humbling for me last year when we did that celebration, when we also had to do a timeline about how we survived, how we started, how the projects came about, and looking back at the exhibition with all the various elements, that was really humbling. And also to have so many of our family, friends gather to witness that sacred moment. Truth be told, I was really moved by the entire experience. I think obviously the journey has not been easy, and I think as an entrepreneur, if you really try to follow God's will, at one point, and I was sharing with a lot of entrepreneurs who want to live by their values, especially Christian entrepreneurs, at a certain moment there will be what I call an Isaac experience. As in, God will ask you, do you love me more than this? And in order to be able to ask you the question, God will ask you for your son, the one whom you love. And likewise, I think any entrepreneur understands this, that when you build a company from scratch, you had no money, you had no possibility, and it's painful. You spend a lot of your time, and your family also sacrifices their time because you are always here. It's a very painful experience. And I think that nearly happened to us 7 years ago when the company went through a crisis. I would say that, after a certain number of years, we were very good at closing projects, closing the sales. But that particular year, that 7 years ago period, something just didn't happen. The sales weren't coming in, things were not happening, and it was just a free fall of projects, And it was extremely painful because I already shared with my partners. I mean, we didn't share the same faith, but I was very open about my belief that this company has to be founded based on values, and they agreed. We did everything possible to build a culture of being purpose-driven, being values-driven, and it was really a very happy company culture. They were really very nice people and people with heart. And I wasn't rich. The money didn't go to me. The money went to the employees, and I was giving my all. And so when this free fall was going on, and my family has sacrificed so much, and I have sacrificed so much, I really remember that in that moment when this was almost collapsing, I was in Trinity Church, and I was, alone, after the Mass, and I really asked God, what is it that you want? I have given you everything. This is not for wealth. I've contributed all, and I did this for other people, and I really didn't understand. I remember at the time where the crisis was going on, the pain of letting go of your colleagues, and I during this COVID-19, and I all these emotions come back again. I know many friends who are losing, who have to ask their employees today. I know how bad that experience can be, and I feel a lot for them because of this entire situation. And it's really painful because it's like, losing your family members. And at that time, with all this free fall, there was an invitation from Rome for me to attend an interfaith meeting. And at that time, I was also very involved in interfaith. I was giving a lot of my time. I was volunteering. And I was just saying that, look, this is a very bad time, and I don't have the money to go for this interfaith event. And the organizer said, look, it may be hard for you, but we really want you to come. And we'll find the providence for you, find the money for you to get you to come for this event. So I went for the event. Again, the company was already in free fall. I don't know what's going to happen. And I was really, really asking God. And I remember in a prayer, I said to God, God, if you gave the company to me, and now if you want to take the company back, take it. I'm ready. But again, being human, you're not ready to deal with that emotion. So I went for the event. I shared the experience, and it was an international interfaith event, very meaningful, very deep. I was happy, but again, at the back of my mind, this company thing was going on. At a certain point, they said that, okay, out of the several hundred people that they said, a group of people are going to meet Pope Francis. And the interesting thing is that if you're interfaith, right, if you're Catholic, it's harder for you to meet the Pope. So you have to be from another religion, right? So if you're Buddhist, you're Shia, you're Sunni Muslim, you have a higher chance to meet the Pope. So I said, okay, great, these people are going to meet the Pope. Then, just before the meeting with the Pope happened, one of the organizers said, look, Lawrence, we want you to come along and meet the Pope. I said, oh, come on, it's too much. Really? Are you kidding me? No, you come, right? And there I was waiting in Casa Santa Marta, and I didn't know how in the world I got the chance to go into Casa Santa Marta to meet the Holy Father. And I was very tense. But then again, the other thing happened. We were supposed to meet the Pope at 9, and 9 became 10, 10 became 10:30, and the Pope didn't come yet. And I was thinking to myself, well, you know what, maybe it's not meant to be. We're not going to meet the Holy Father. And then the Holy Father walked in. And I was, running through in my head, what I'm going to say to him, what I'm going to tell him. I consider myself a relatively good speaker, but I'm suddenly out of words, and I didn't know what to say. And when the Holy Father, because the Holy Father greet everyone after, nice exchange of a few words with all the different religious leaders, and I was one of the last, I just decided to pour out my heart when the Holy Father came and said that, Holy Father, I have an enterprise, and I tried to give all in the enterprise to live the gospel through the enterprise. And, Pope Francis' English is not that great, but he listened. And I just asked Pope Francis, can I hug you? And he said yes. And we hugged. And I only remember one thing about that experience, that I remember that all will be well. I just heard this voice very clear in my mind after I hugged Pope Francis. And I think the incredible thing was that after that meeting with Pope Francis, I felt I could do anything again. And when I left that event, things literally took on for the best. I'm not saying that hugging Pope Francis is a lucky charm, but I'm saying that hearing that word said to me, the Pope didn't say that, but I heard all will be well. It's like God the Father hugged me, and that's it, I can go again. And I also want to say that in that moment of crisis, I was really fortunate to have a group of friends whom I meet every week for my spiritual sharing. It's like a cell group within the Focolare, and we are young adults, we have different professions, some are teachers, some are engineers, some are professionals, and we are always sharing how we live the gospel in our workplace. And when I was going through this free fall, to be able to have their support really helped to balance whatever the turmoil that I was going through in my head. And I think that those moments of intervention, meeting the Holy Father, unexpected meeting of the Holy Father, the group that I could rely on in my vulnerability, really, really helped me, and also helped me to understand what's the next thing. The the other important thing that I learned from that, so after that encounter with the Holy Father, and I started to relax. I started to know that, look, now I understood that the business is totally in God's hands, and it's important to trust God. And after that, we had this really rapid global expansion. Councils was going into every single direction. People started to approach us, and we met people, and then we went to the United States, and also we started to expand into Europe. And I would say that it's really, really beautiful to see God's plan, because before the crisis that hit the company was largely a Singaporean enterprise. But after that, it became international. So it was also important for me to accept God's vision rather than my vision. Again, if you remember what I said earlier, very early on in my life, I wanted to be a priest. I think I'm going to be a great priest, but it's all me. I didn't really listen to God. I was trying to impose my vision. So even for the company, I was trying to impose the vision. I said, oh, this is the way we are living the gospel. This is the way, but actually it's not right, because he wanted a bigger vision, right? So the key was really to listen to him and not to assume that you yourself has the right vision. And I think what accumulated, what completed that understanding or trusting in God was this year in January. I was asked by the Focolare movement to present the testimonial of counselors to President Mattarella of how we try to live the gospel and the culture of unity, and how we are trying to change the world because of this experience. The other thing is, as you become more and more conscious about trying to follow God, I think over time, as you grow older, you start to come into a very comfortable rhythm with God. As in the early days, when I was younger, I was always like, okay, I need to do this to do His will, right? It's always that forced thing. But as I grow older, it starts to really, it's like playing a score sheet or playing music, right? After a while, you get to a rhythm, and it's a very comfortable rhythm. You know when you're closest or when you're furthest away from God. And last year, I had the chance to visit the house of Kara Lubick. And in front of her bed, there is this picture of Jesus forsaken on the cross and Mary desolate. And that was a very stark image for me, because I remember when I went to Rome for that youth congress, one of the very, very special moments that they asked each one of us young people to go to the chapel in front of the Eucharist to sort of like consecrate our lives to Jesus forsaken on the cross. And at that time, I didn't really understand, but I understood it was a sacred moment, it was a special moment. But somehow at this stage of my life, I really could connect the dots and see why I did that and how my journey led me here. And this particular prayer of consecration was said in a sense, it was composed by Kara Lubick, and is very significant. I like to read it to you so that you know what I say. So the prayer goes like this: I've only one spouse on earth, Jesus crucified and forsaken. I've no God outside of Him. In Him is all of heaven with the Trinity, and all the earth with humanity. So what is His is mine, and nothing else. Universal suffering is His, therefore mine. I will look for it throughout the world, every moment of my life. What hurts me is mine. Mine is the suffering that gazes at me at this moment. The suffering of the person next to me is mine. Mine is the everything that is not peace, joy, beauty, lovable, serene. So this is how it will be for the years that I've left, thirsting for suffering, anguish, despair, sadness, separation, exile, abandonment, agony, for everything that is He, and He is suffering. In this way, I will dry out the waters of tribulation in many hearts nearby, and because of communion with my almighty spouse, in many distant ones, I will pass like fire that consumes everything which has to crumble, leaving only the truth standing. And at a 14-year-old, when I read this, it was really a very, big moment, right? And then now when in my 40s, and I look at this, and I finally understand that at a certain point in your life, God will open your eyes. But God loves you so much that God only opens your eyes to see certain things when you are ready. And God is patient with you. And when God gives you that vision, it also means that you are more mature to take on the challenges that will come. But He will never give you a cross you cannot carry. But the cross, yes, the cross is going to be there. And so I would say that the relationship with others through Jesus is never going to be easy. Why is it not easy? It's not easy because your own family will misunderstand you. And even if you try to do things because you feel that it is out of goodwill, you have no other bad intentions, people will misread it. And I think now this relationship with others through Jesus helped me to understand that the most important thing is to not try to solve a problem. The most important thing is to just be an instrument in His will. And probably the problem that you are thrown with, whether it's a difficult relationship with a family member, or whether even if you're doing something very beautiful for the church and people misunderstand you, you're not meant to solve the problem. You're meant to be an instrument. And the solving of the problem, you have to leave it to God. And so I've come to be comfortable with that, in not trying to solve it. Again, when I'm young, it's always about trying to solve, but in this moment, I understand the wisdom of time and space, that it's up to God's time, and it's how far God wants to push on in order to evolve the will of God in the other person. And so, I would say that in understanding this, what also has become beautiful in running this entire enterprise is that you get into a very comfortable space. And of course, the name Consulus in Latin means with others. And in the last recent years, what we were doing in the company and also around the world was to really try to promote this idea of the economy of communion. The economy of communion was initiated by Kara Lubick in 1991 when she went to Sao Paulo, and she was flying over the city before she landed at the airport, and she saw this huge ring of slums around the great metropolis of Sao Paulo, and she felt that it was like a crown of thorns. And she thought of this idea about whether businesses can do their contribution in order to bridge inequality, not just as charity, but in the very concept of business, to have a spirit of generosity and to practice generosity by giving some a preference for the poor. And I would say that in choosing this vocation, which we now choose around the world, regardless of faith, like I said, a lot of people in Consulus, they are not Catholics, but they know that this company and the ideas is inspired by the principles of the economy of communion. It has unleashed a new way of thinking, which we call charismatic creativity. And I sort of explained that in our own discovery, we were inspired by Kara Lubick's thinking. Of course, she was a Catholic, she chose God. But what was interesting is that because she loved her neighbors and she saw God in her neighbors, she discovered her purpose and her plan. And in doing so, a movement was born. And we shared this in our anniversary year last year, that it was true for the Consulus experience. When we try to love the others without any agenda, any commercial agenda, we try to love them and listen to them and try to help them discover their purpose. And in doing so, the purpose is revealed. And once that purpose is revealed, how do we know that that purpose is true for the person, or is true on what we need to do? How do we understand what we need to do? Is that we will see providence. And providence is not just money. Providence could be a person. Suddenly, we have no connection, we have no ability to get into a country or a project, but God sent us the right person at the right time, and we could expand, or we could enter into a project opportunity. The other thing is, after a while, as you try to journey with God, there will always be this nagging struggle. I always like the readings of St. Paul, when St. Paul literally prayed to God to grumble, can you get rid of this irritant, in my life, and all these things. And I think my personal struggles is two things. One thing is impatience impatience is, we know that everything is the plan of God, but one of the thing is that you're also excited like a kid. You want to see, what's next, right? And God helps to slow me down at times to say that this is not the right time, Lawrence. This is not the right time, and I always pray for the gift of patience, because I'm not a very patient person. That's one. And the second thing is, of course, when I was young and I was in one of these youth congresses, and one of the things that the founder of the Vocabulary Movement used to say that, you kids, when you are young, right, you'll be worried about boyfriend, girlfriend, but when you're older, the problem is pride. And I remember that very much. And I think whatever I try to do, whether it's the culture of the company or in the work, in the ministry, in the movement, I try to really, really remember that, to keep myself still and silent, to always push myself very hard to humble myself, so that I will not have the human pride. I can have, I always want the pride of God, which is the humbling pride, but not the human pride. And I think those are always the struggles that I have to overcome, to the end of my life. A favorite verse, well, when I was very sure that I was going to be a priest, I wrote a letter to Carol Ludwig to ask her, this is my ambition, to be a priest. Literally, I asked her, what do you think? And I think in her wisdom, she didn't say great, yes or no. She wrote back to me that, it's great that you have this intuition, and I offer you this phrase of life. And the phrase of life, the gospel phrase, that verse that she gave me was, it is not you who chose me, but I who chose you. And looking back, I finally understood, because at that time I actually thought, see, this is a confirmation, I'm going to be a great priest. But looking back, I realized that actually it's really, really not you who choose God and tell God what you want to do. It's about being open to God and letting God tell you what He wants you to do. So that's how I have interpreted this verse of the gospel now, having the benefit of hindsight and all these things. I think on the question of how do I find joy, freedom, peace, and hope, I think now that the company is at a wildly different stage, it's in 16 countries, we are doing projects, we're dealing with 4 or 5 languages. We just did a strategy workshop for a large media organization that is present in 12 over countries, simultaneous translation. So, and a lot of people are writing in to join us. There is pressure. I wouldn't deny it. There's a lot of expectations, and a lot of people are looking at us. I do feel the stress at times. But what I find, the comfort and the peace again, is to go back to the fundamentals. I think this January, when I was in that event with President Mattarella, and they actually asked me to share the experience briefly, just give the introduction line in Italian, and I was stressed because I don't know how to speak Italian, and they asked me to do that. I realized that if God is asking us to do something great, then I need to have the joy and the freedom and the trust that He has figured out a way. And all I need to do is to be that faithful servant and to be open, to listen, to see the innovation that He's showing us. Right? And so in that presence of 400 or 500 old people, and it was telecast live throughout the whole of Italy, I felt a great sense of peace as I was in that experience. So the question is, how do we know we have made an impact in people's lives? I think ever since we gifted ourselves to really go out there and tell people about shaping a more fairer and equitable economy, the economy of communion, and putting our experience out there to bring about a united world, people want to hear this kind of message, because generally there are too many depressing news. And I think over the last 5-6 years, with that growth of opportunities to give, I think what was heartening for me is that being able to go there and share, especially with the youth, that look, if you really find deep within you that you want to subscribe to a higher purpose and you want to work towards it, it's extremely rewarding. Because what I see most of the time is a lot of people, sort of like the educational journey guides them and their purpose, but after they leave university, they don't really know what to do or why do they exist. And that's really a pity, because it's like, if we can help people to find more, to help them believe in themselves, to help them understand that they do have the capacity to make a contribution and make an impact in people's lives, to inspire them to do that, that's exactly the experience I've been through. It is extremely enlightening. And so, I've been asked to go around in Taiwan, in Australia, even to share with a lot of working professionals, entrepreneurs, to help them discover that it is possible to find a mission that they believe in and to live it out in very concrete way. And I had a look back at my life. If I was so adamant about being a priest, one of the reasons was because I very much wanted to, preach. And the interesting thing is that because I've been flying around so much to share how people can make a difference in their lives, every single time it seems more like a pastoral experience to me. But the only difference is that I could share it with my life. I could share how, through the difficulties or through the challenges, you can actually subscribe to a values-driven approach. You can actually be purpose-driven, and actually it can work. I remember when I was in a Catholic university, and I was doing this class on ethics, and I actually asked the students, do you believe that being ethical will be helpful to you in your work? And more than 90% of them said no. And they think that in order to thrive in the working world, you have to cheat, you have to be dishonest. And I had to, walk them through the various experiences, whether public experiences, my personal experience, to go like, no, the world is moving very, very fast towards transparency, shared responsibility, and our time has come. And I think that, being able to share this with a lot of people and to help young people realize their power, or also to work with others who share the same vision. Like when I was in, again, this year in Italy, and we were working with, I was having a discussion with the International Center for Unity in Politics, because, there's so much division in politics, and that it is really important to help politicians to not just disagree for the sake of disagreeing, but even though they are from different spectrum of the political debate, to be able to come together and to work for a common good, that matters. And I think along the way, as I was doing this sharing, as my colleagues are doing this sharing, we managed to find a lot of people who share these ideas of being purpose-driven and shaping a better world and shaping a better economy. After I went to speak in Taiwan once, and the subsequent year my colleague also spoke in Taiwan. One of the person was this professor, Irene. She was very moved by hearing about consulars. I mean, she's a Protestant, but when she heard, she always thought that this is out of this world. There's actually a company who believe in being purpose-driven and shaping a better world. It sounds like utopia. And so she was literally in our office for a month, trying to see whether, we were real or not. And she was so moved after the experience that she found a family, and that we were also doing very concrete things. This is normal business consultancy, doing solid business work, but able to have this kind of culture. And she was telling me that, look, I wish that even in my church we have such a culture of unity. And this kind of things that you hear, the youth, who tells you that, thank you for sharing this with us. I think I found my purpose. I think I'm going to try again to bring purpose into my workplace. And then you have people of different faith or denominations who find the purpose in themselves, to renew themselves, to go out there and be able to influence others to shape a better world. I think those things are little signs of confirmation that we are making a huge impact in people's lives, whether it's a personal level or at the corporate level. And I think that's the kind of spirit I also want to give to Natalia, our 4-year-old. And what I've been trying to do, my wife and I have been trying to do, is to be absolutely transparent with her. We host, for example, meetings of the folklorists, so spiritual retreats, meetings, sometimes they happen in our house, and we get her involved with activities, and I tell her when I travel to give talks, I tell her exactly what it is. And so what you have is that I found that it really benefited Natalia a lot, because she is entering into a culture of joy. That means she's not learning about her Catholic faith because she has to, but she's being excited or inspired. And you know, sometimes I really have to slow her down, because one day she came back from school and she told me, you know, Daddy, a lot of people do not know Jesus. And I was asking my friends, why don't you know Jesus? And I was like, well, you know, it's good that you know Jesus, and you know Jesus loves you, and you know, it takes time, right? Everybody don't have to know Jesus, but they will know eventually, right? By the way you love them. And you know, Natalia said to me, yeah, right? So I should be the first to love every one of my friends, right? Yes, just do that. Just be the first to love and take care of them. Okay, I'll do that. So, you know, she's having a lot of this kind of inspired conversations on her own. And also because I think that by getting her involved, like last year we were in this family retreat that the folkloric movement always do. We call it the City of Mary, where we try to live 3 days of you know, living the gospel, how to love one another, and how to build a united world inspired by God's vision of John 17:21. And you know, in that kind of environment, intergenerational, they are young kids, they are teenagers, they are working professionals, they are the elderly. That kind of a family environment provides a very nurturing space, I would say, for kids. So the faith is not book-based, but the faith is culture-based. And I think that one of the things I look back, right, I mean, this is a very good question that CBN is asking me, is that in your life, right, what is the best decision you've ever made? I think when I realized that I was not, as in God didn't call me to be a priest, I asked God that, God, can you please send me someone, a life companion, a dear friend, but who also believes in living the gospel in a very, very real way, and not as, you know, not as identity, oh, because we're Catholic, so let's just be Catholic. No, but really, really try to live a life, as a family life inspired by the gospel. And I think the best decision I made was to ask Michelle to marry me. And it's interesting because when I married Michelle, I understood that our marriage prepared me to be able to build the business as well, because we went through so much, and she sacrificed so much for the family, because for a long time, right, she was the one who was having a stable income, and I couldn't, because you know, building a business is tough. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a lot in order for your employees to be paid. And I think I couldn't have asked for a better wife than Michelle. And I think that again is an aspect of, if you really try to live the will of God, God sends you the right life partner. And I always tell this to a lot of young people. You know, some friends, I know some of these young friends, they are very good Catholics, and then they are looking for their boyfriend, they're looking for a girlfriend. I always tell them the same story. You pray, you go to God, you said you are asking for a life partner who will also help you to live the will of God. You really ask, you know, and he or she will come. And I think today, you know, based on all the experiences, who is Jesus for me? I think for me, deep down inside, as I was telling you, I did feel for a great number of years that I didn't become a priest. I felt that I didn't follow on with my promise to God, because I was so convinced and I was going to be that great priest, you know, but it didn't happen. So a few years ago, I was in a Catholic university, and we were going to do this partnership with that Catholic university, is Sophia University. And you know, I was having this deep sharing with the dean, and he is a professor of theology and the aspect of Trinity. And we were having this very deep spiritual exchange. He didn't speak a word of English. He only spoke in Italian. I had my friend translating. And at the end of that meeting, I was very moved spiritually, and I decided to sort of confess. I told him, you know, Father, can I tell you that, you know, for many years, I felt guilty at not being a priest. And I felt very bad. And then when he spoke in English, he said, look, Lawrence, I'm a priest. I'm a priest in this university. But you're not called to be a priest, but you're called to be Jesus in the workplace. And I was like, oh God, thank you for that answer. I was moved deeply to tears, right? That I finally understood in a sense, but it took a long time that things are meant to be. And that at least what I understood from the whole experience is that if you try to follow the will of God, there will be many, many imperfect moments. But so long as you try, you start again, you want to come back again, God will guide you, God will help you so that you can live up to your call as Jesus wherever you are. Jesus in the family, Jesus in the workplace, Jesus in the parish that you serve. And I think that's being Jesus or trying to be like Jesus as much as possible. Even though we are so frail and we are so weak, but so long as we try, it can be done. And I think what I would like to give you, if I can, what I've learned in this journey so far, and there's still a journey to go, is I think what I've deeply understood is that the first thing first is to really ask, what is God's plan? What is the will of God? And how do you know that this is indeed His will? And you will see very, very concrete signs like in the work and in my journey so far. If I ask, if it is really the will of God, whatever I've asked, I have received. Like I asked for a great spouse, I found Michelle. I asked to be honest with my beliefs, to build a business. I found business partners that are not Catholics, they are Muslim and they're Methodist, but they also subscribe to the same values and beliefs. So you really, really will get what you ask for if it is the plan of God. And then the next thing is, if you ask is one thing, because sometimes you may be asking based on your own vision. It's not God's vision. It's something that you want to see, but you must be prepared to ask His plan. And so what I learned is you really, really have to learn how to listen. Listen to everyone. The person may not be a Catholic, but someone may say something to you and you go like, oh wow. Yeah, and you try to piece it together by praying and listening, and it always works for me. And there's so many moments in my life that because I try to listen with love, I found that and being very attentive in that aspect, that means not try to listen to get an answer, but try to empty myself and to listen to what God wants me to do. I always found a way out. And this is how innovation comes. Innovation comes out of this willingness to be empty so that God can inspire us with better ideas that we can never imagine. And I think lastly is, whatever we try to do is to really, really try to be able to seek ye first the kingdom of God, and all will be given. And I think what I experienced is in Constance is this. I mean, we didn't imagine we will be in all around the world. We'll have colleagues speaking in 12 languages. We'll be in 16 countries. And we will find so many like-minded consultants from design, from finance, from human resource, all believing that consulting can be a way to shape a united world. And again, I could never have foreseen this. And I think if we try to live and to try to seek His will, everything will be given on to you. So I hope this has been useful, and I look forward to the conversation next. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lawrence. That was amazing, inspiring. We have a lot of questions from the audience. So if I can have you up on the screen. There you are. So let me ask you one question which came up by email last night. It's from Louisa Lau. It says, entrepreneur is often associated with money making, making profits. How would one connect this with God, being the entrepreneur? And that is, we are not just after the money, so to speak. As much as we do money to sustain our living, how do we ascertain it's God's led, God being the entrepreneur, and not our Homo sapien who's wanting to have more money?
Thank you, Arrow. Thank you, Louisa. It's a great question. I think it's a beautiful thing that if we look into the Bible, the idea of God's mission given to sort of if there is an image of an entrepreneur, there is a beautiful image given by Luigino Bruni, a very eminent economist and Catholic economist and scholar who shared that Noel when God asked him to build an ark. That was a very, very important story, and also a vision of how an entrepreneur, in a sense, partakes in the mission of God. And there are many, many experiences. And if you go back to the Bible, especially, it's very interesting for me that one of the first disciples that Jesus called were fishermen. And who were fishermen? They were entrepreneurs. And that says a lot, because in our faith, especially the Our Father, we are literally asked to pray, "Give us this day our daily bread." And so if we really pay attention to those words, and we understand it not as an idea, but we understand it that is real, then you will understand that revenue and profit is a consequence of your faith and your faith relationship and your faith in action. Just as I shared throughout my entire journey, this is really my experience. We often talk a lot in the company, and that's why it's also interesting for me to have this beautiful relationship with my Muslim partner. We literally can say to each other, we don't know whether it's the will of God to get this project, and we do discuss, and we do entrust it to God. And I have seen many times that when you understand that everything is under the power of God, and you believe so, and you try to act accordingly, God also comes to you and gives you answers in very unique ways. And I think the experiences I shared earlier reinforce that reality. And I want to add, the other beautiful thing is, as a Catholic entrepreneur, do you know that as a faith, we have the most amount of literature of how to be a Christian entrepreneur? And there are so many documents that you can find if you want to read about how to live your faith as an entrepreneur. And I read a number of those. There is a beautiful document of Vocation of a Business Leader, very beautiful document, and it brings in passages of the gospel. It helps you to understand profit. It helps you to understand taxation. It helps you to understand human resource. So I would say that we are richly blessed by the inspiration of faith. We have the tools if we want to look for them. And number three, if we try it, you have to try, and then you will learn. If you just read it as a theory and you're not trying it out, you will never learn. It's just what I have managed to do with the open acceptance of my business partners who are also trying to live their faith at work.
Thank you, Lawrence. The next question is from Bernard Lim. Hi, Lawrence. Thank you for your sharing. As a Catholic leader in the secular business world, I'd like to ask you how do you keep the balance when partners and clients entertain you? Here I am referring to social activities like drinks, KTV, gambling, etc. How do you struggle to maintain your value, balance, and moral compass?
Before I ROD, as in I used to have to go for in-camp training, and we'll gather as the boys, right? And a number of us have businesses. And one day, my friend who runs a very big business, he asked me, "Lawrence, do you entertain?" "No." "You don't buy drinks?" "No." "You don't buy girls?" "No." "How do you make money?" I said, "How do I explain it to you? My position to him, he's not a Christian, so I explained him plainly. I said that if as a consultant I have to buy a job, that means I'm not valued as a consultant. So I want to respect my dignity. That's my excuse to him. But I've always maintained that if I have to pay an extra thing, I have to buy over a client, then it's really not the will of God. And it has been a very reliable gauge. And there's a reason why the kind of clients that we get, I think we are really blessed. We are very exceptional clients, that people who stay with us for many years, who ask us to come back, who ask us to serve them, and they know our principles. As I said, Counselors is not a Catholic company. We have many people of different faiths. Like in some countries, it is expected that you have to pay a bribe to get a job. Like in one country that we have been operating for many years, a lot of consultants are supposed to pay internally, and we don't pay. But the very fact that people knew about this and they still hire us, and they know that we are above board, just strengthens our credibility. But of course, it's hard because we are cutting off a possibility of sales. But just to say, I had the joy of one particular experience. There's one country that we were asked to work on, and it was linked to one of the major infrastructure financing. But again, the people who was arranging the deal, they wanted a bride, and we refused. 5 years later, we are in that same country, serving a state-owned enterprise without paying a bride. So I do get a lot of thrill about such victories when it happens that I didn't have to pay a bride to get to do a project in any particular country who have asked me before. So just to say that it's also a personal count. You know, how many times I've dodged the bullet of paying brides, and I still keep dodging them. It's not that it's not always happening, but it just comes. So entertainment, no. My CFO is very happy. I don't have entertainment budget. My entertainment budget is laughable if you ever know the percentage. And I think, how do I struggle to maintain my value? Like I said, being part of the Focolari cell group, having a community, I would recommend everybody to find their own community, whether it's Legion of Mary, whether you're in neo-catechumen, whether if your parishes provide that spiritual cell group, is extremely important beyond the liturgy. If you don't have a group where you can be vulnerable and share your struggles, it's going to be problematic. Of course, I have the other advantage that in Consulates, people openly share about their struggles, about values, and it's normal because we have been doing this for 16 years. But if you are in a work environment where you cannot openly share about your values and how do you maintain your integrity and how do you follow your pathway, then you really, really need to find a spiritual community. And I'm fortunate that the Focolari is there. And many a times when I'm in the Focolari retreats, there is this like, hey, remember where you came from and where you're going, right? And that's extremely helpful. So everybody should find a spiritual community, should find a spiritual advisor to journey with them, because it's extremely important. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence. I have a question from Anna Leong. What is the impact of COVID-19 on Consulates? Please share what you believe God is trying to tell us or asking of us in this time.
Yes, thank you for the question. As a firm, we have already, because this is our day job in change management and scenario planning, very early when it started, when COVID started in January, we started doing our own assessment. And our internal assessment is that this thing will last until April. So we have already prepared. We gone digital, we design our processes, and we have got a long runway in terms of projects. So on our own, we are not so concerned. I think we are more concerned about a lot of small, medium enterprises, especially non-profit organizations who don't know how to deal with this thing. We have launched a global free consultation. We are doing our best to help small companies who are struggling with thinking on how to deal with this upheaval. That is one of our global commitments. The other thing, of course, what I see, what is God trying to tell us? I very much agree with what Pope Francis say. COVID-19 is a very opportune moment. The Holy Spirit is trying to tell us to imagine. And I personally think that when Carol Lubick in 1991 spoke about the vision of an economy of communion, that the economy serves everyone by loving, this is really, really the right time to question, because COVID-19 has proved three things. COVID-19 has proved that if the nationalists and the extremists have their way, we are seeing how this is the reality that the COVID-19 is showing us, that it's actually not workable. That means you cannot actually have walls, because if you have walls, your economy dies. So the vision of exclusiveness, you can succeed in an economy of your own, is actually not practical. But the vision of interdependence, the vision of learning how to live with one another and a united world, is actually more pragmatic and more real than what the extremists and the nationalists are saying. So that's number one. So I think this, the argument that Carol Lubick and Pope Francis and all the Holy whatever our Holy Fathers have been saying, Pope Benedict has been saying, this is really the moment to prove that their thinking is more pragmatic and relevant now. Number two, COVID-19 is also showing us that a lot of governments, because of their inherent rivalry, they are not able to collaborate. And what you see is a lot of grassroots, a lot of people on their own initiatives, like whether it's in Singapore, Europe, the US, a lot of people are doing their best on their own, personally, enterprise level, to do something for COVID-19. So we are coming to a new normal where governments are not as collaborative, but at the grassroots level, at people level, a lot of people are extremely collaborative, and I see a groundswell and great desire to do something. And in fact, what we are doing in Constellars is that we are catalyzing a lot of these discussions. We are participating in a lot of these discussions on how to form what we call human chains, human networks for a better world in a variety of situations, whether it's economy or whether it's in politics, but at the grassroots level. I'm not trying to do anything with the government, because the rivalry among governments is quite scary, and actually it's not helpful. But what you see is that this is the moment, if I sense it right, God is trying to show us that this crisis is time for all of us to come together and see this as a great opportunity to shape a united world.
Thank you, Lawrence. I have a question from Beng Seng. Thanks for sharing how God has led you in your journey. Could you share more how you motivate your own staff?
Thank you, Beng Seng. To join Constellars, everyone is asked to write a personal journey. We insist that identifying with your own purpose and whether your purpose aligns with Constellars' purpose is extremely important. Then as part of that process, we also share with them our agenda. We believe in being a purpose-driven company. We believe in our values of unity, humility, leadership, and professionalism. We explain how we live them in all the practices. We tell them our agenda is to shape an inclusive and fair economic system, and we are crazy about that. And it's not something on the wall. We have it in our business model. We have it in our products and services, and because of this stringent entry requirement, it gives us another type of stuff. In Constellars, you're not allowed to call someone the boss. We ban the word because it's not true, and also because we strive to build a circle of leaders. So we don't motivate our leaders, because everyone is a leader here. They're supposed to be clear about who they are, what they believe in, and they're good in what they do. And so I'm really blessed to be able to serve in an organization, in a firm, where I don't motivate. I don't have to motivate the team. I think we say as it is when something is going wrong. We just say this is wrong. But it's not about motivation, but it's about taking a very objective and purpose-driven view to see how we can do things better. Yeah. So motivation doesn't really fit in, because we also have many moments where we share. I mean, every Friday we have circles within the World Center, which is a few of us from different countries. Then every month we have this global circle where we connect the 16 countries, and there are so many of us on these chats. But those moments inspire me, so they motivate me when I'm feeling a bit tired or jaded, because we are trying to push through something and things doesn't happen. So I have actually the benefit of on the receiving end of inspiration from so many Constellites who are doing amazing stuff, because we are few, you understand, in different parts of the world. It's not that we are big in different parts of the world, but we are one or two, but each one is trying their best to change the world. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence. I have a question from Tekpo. Hi, Lawrence. Thanks very much for your sharing. It has been very heartwarming. You're involved in juggling faith at work, family, etc. How much time in terms of percentage do you allocate to running your own consultancy business?
Thanks, Nepo. I would say before the crisis, 7 years ago, I don't sleep. I'm very stressed. After the crisis, after I met Pope Francis and Constance took on this change, I sleep very well. In fact, when Natalia was born, I was able to dedicate 1.5 to almost 2 months to being at home. I have a lot of luxury of time to be with Natalia in the formative years. And it's really because how I understood how much God loved me that gave me a team that I couldn't imagine to assemble, and that team can manage on their own. In fact, it's very funny, when I took this too long a paternity leave, it was not my partners who asked me to come back. My partner said, yeah, take as much time as you need, right? It was a client, a friend in that client's company who said, hey, Lawrence, I think you better come back. I think they are getting a little bit jittery. You're not in the scene at all, right? And you're needed here to inspire them. So just to say that I have I now have a very privileged position that, remember I was saying that I now trust God and I can really run. There's a very nice rhythm that I'm enjoying right now. Yeah. So a lot of time with the family, I would say, more than I ever imagined. In fact, I thought it was impossible, but I can do it. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence. I have another question from Anna Leong. What keeps you awake at night? How do you meet the challenges of human pride?
I think what keeps me awake at night is how ridiculous so many situations is. I mean, COVID-19 keeps me at night because of the fact that we can do a lot of things in a very sensible way. We can do a lot of things in a very collaborative way, like the fighting over face masks and the fighting over PPE equipment. That keeps me at night. And what keeps me at night is also the fact that a lot of like-minded people could easily come together and make a difference, but because of jealousy and because of pride, we are not able to do it. So those kind of ridiculous things keep me at night. So I think, how do you meet the challenges of human pride? Well, in Consulars, we have a practice that is very similar to fraternal correction in the religious community, if you are familiar with. We call it bonsai. Every year, everyone have to go through this, and we do it in a circle. So what happens in the first round is you are given a pruning. So if you are the most senior person in the company, you are pruned first, and your most junior colleague prune you first. So I will get pruned by everybody. But the often criticism about me is, Lawrence, you speak too fast. You're not giving enough details. And we are trying to catch up with you, right? Those kind of things. So that practice that we have practiced for 10 over years has been very, very useful, especially among the partners. Even though we work so closely, we are able to do this bonsai every year. That keeps track of the pride. Then, of course, in that circle, we also have affirmation. So it's not just criticizing you, but there's great amount of affirmation as well to affirm you with love. Yeah. So, and I think, like again, as I said, if you have a spiritual community, you have a very, very good instrument to keep your pride, because again, many a times, things will be growing and expanding, and then I will be in a spiritual retreat. I didn't, with no other intention, I attend the spiritual retreat judiciously as much as I can. And I just sit there, and the messages of God will be as clear as daylight in the meditation. And I will look back and I realize, of course, it's true. What I have doesn't belong to me. What I know doesn't belong to me. All I can see doesn't belong to me. All belongs to God. And so if you have a spiritual community, if you're attending those spiritual retreats on a regular basis, like I attend up to 3 or 4 per year, and I have the additional benefit that in Consulars we could do this kind of deep human. It's not Christian meditation that we do in Consulars, but we can have a very open and almost spiritual-like kind of sharing to help one another. Yeah, your pride is contained. And I'll be the first to tell you, that I know my problem is pride, and I think that is the reason why I married my great friend Michelle. And I think the beautiful thing about having someone who is a spiritual companion and a wife is that Michelle always knows when is the right time to help me to adjust my pride. And I'm always grateful to, whenever she's insightful to say some things that she's spot on. Yeah. So find a good spouse.
Thanks, Lawrence. I have a question from Charles Lim. Thanks for your open and inspiring sharing. You shared few instances when you had to make tough calls to uphold Christian values. Could you share some more personal principles you use in making the right judgment and decision, especially on gray area matters in business? I think you may have answered this a bit earlier, but you can elaborate further.
Yeah, maybe I'll give a short answer. Thank you, Charles. So what I do in the firm where we have to make expert level kind of decision, I never make it alone. Like I see it together with my, when it comes to finance especially, I see it together with my finance head, which is also my Methodist partner. And seeing together is a policy in Consulars. For example, if we are making a decision on the market, I don't make a decision on my own. I discuss it with the head, the country head, to see in unity. And I found that this seeing unity to be able to give an opinion and to be willing to die that opinion to allow the grace of God to enter is extremely important. Like we often have to deal with, people trying to avoid taxes, and we always have to make the grounds to say, no, you cannot avoid taxes, right? You want to minimize it to whatever you can, but no, the point is you have to pay your taxes for wherever you are and whatever you do. As a client, you have to pay your taxes. So again, those are expert related matter, and talking to the right experts, whether it's in my case, talking to my finance partner to how do we make a decision, this is what their request, to discussing this with another country partner who is very familiar with the laws of the land and listening to him or her, that forms a very useful balance. And of course, you all know that in the Bible, right? It says where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in your midst. And I try to apply that very much. So I try to, when I have to make such decisions, I'll pray about it and I'll talk to someone because I'm confused in my head. And I pray for the grace of God to come so that I'll make a principled decision that is along with it. I mean, it's not perfect, but more than 90% of the time, we make sensible and wise decisions that amazes me.
Thanks, Lawrence. I have a question now from Teresa Koo. How do you deal with office politics in your company? And how do you advise your clients to deal with it?
Our situation is quite unique. We don't have office politics. It might shock you, but we don't. We also, because I realized that politics happen in a lot of companies because they don't build relationship by design. And I mean it in very clear terms. So what I mean is in Consulus, because we have the regular sharing of vulnerability, because we insist our KPIs are measured on relationship, then money counts as a form of those relationships. And because we have a cultural practice, like we invest a lot of time on sharing, just purely on sharing, not even talking about meetings or making money. That's very odd for a consulting firm, this big and present around the world, right? So because we have those kind of ethos, people know that the relationship thing is a real thing for us. It's not something for us to add on in order to make everyone feel good. It's not. It's the premise of how we do things. Then the other thing is that because of bonsai, we do regular bonsai. There's no need for politics because you can literally tell the person and the staff we hire, they watch us. Do we fire them? If they make a fair comment, we don't. And so over the years, a trust has been built between leadership and the staff that we let them speak their minds and in a very open manner. So I think that has helped us. We do implement such practices in a lot of companies. Not all companies succeed in doing so because after a while they become very afraid. And also because a lot of companies are very transactional and they have to pay a lot of money to control people, or they have to pay a lot of money to motivate people. We don't have to do that. So I think we also realized over the years that we are in a very privileged position. But then again, we are not alone. A lot of companies and the economy of communion, they have similar experiences like us that once you try to build a culture of purpose and unity, I mean, you really try. It's not something that you talk about, but you do it through policy, you do it through practices. The management must be the first one to show example that you are willing to listen, that you're not perfect, but you're willing to listen. Then it creates a mindset shift. It creates trust. So a lot of companies, we can say that there's a poverty of trust, right? So what we always do is in a lot of companies, we first study the level of trust in an organization, right? Whether it's transactional, whether they are transformative, or whether they are transfigurative. And most companies are at the transactional level of trust. Then we have to slowly redesign their cultural practices, redesign their emphasis in business model. Because if you don't change the business model to allow an equal balance of purpose and profit, it doesn't work. It's just a slogan, right? So if you want a company without politics, it has to happen by strategic design. It's not, you can't motivate people and you can't just say, okay, let's kumbaya and let's sing a few songs, have a few drinks and celebrate unity. It doesn't happen like that. So we do helping companies overcome the negativity of politics is actually a big part of our work globally, because it's almost like cancer afflicting so many corporations. Yeah.
Thanks, Lawrence. A question from Michael Yin. May I know what you feel about the current state of innovation in this world? And what technologies do you think will be key in revolutionizing Industry 4.0?
Thank you for the question. It's just my sense over the years serving in the innovation sector. There are literally three types of innovation. One which is obvious is trend-based. What I mean trend-based, somebody say IoT, Internet of Things is very important, so everybody chase after it and everybody try to make something out of it, right? That's one. Then another type of innovation is what we call technology enablers. So something has happened, so we have better microprocessors, we have better chips. So because of that, or we have smartphones, more powerful smartphones, they are more powerful than the computers we used to have. And that is an enabler. So that creates a base for innovation. But the third type, which is very rare, is what I call enlightened innovation. So these are the type initiated by the seers of the present. They see very well the present and see very well the future. So you can say people like Andy Grove, Steve Jobs. And interestingly, a lot of these guys, they have a deep spiritual roots. I'm not saying they're religious, but they have a very deep sensitivity to where humanity is and where humanity is going. And I think the last one, which is enlightened innovation, is rare. Most of the time it's trend-based technology enablers, and then people call it innovation. But what is needed, and the last one, the reason why I said the last one is because as a Christian, the most important thing, as I was saying, that is to discover the will of God, right? So I always said that in my life journey, I understood that how do you know something is really a plan of God? You see innovation, but it's an innovation you don't expect. It's an innovation given by the Holy Spirit. And you won't know how to put it together, but somehow, if you try to be faithful to the will of God, which is the Father, you try to love your neighbor, which is Jesus, the Son, and if you do that well, following the will of God, loving the others around you extremely well, and you try to do something with that intent, honestly and sincerely, innovation comes. So innovation can happen by you not being a medical expert, and then suddenly you are able to raise money and found a new business model to support a medical clinic to help the poor. Enlightened innovation can come whereby you never foresaw that you could be doing this thing, but actually you're the best person with all your previous skills. It comes together and an aha moment happens that you're able to do something different. So paying attention and seeing with the eyes of God, trying to find out what is enlightened innovation is, I think, is key, especially in this day and age where there's too much talk of trends, there's too much obvious speak. Okay, processors, who doesn't know? Smartphones, anyone, okay, who doesn't know? So those are easy answers. But the harder answers are those that in the midst of all the noise, what are you hearing the most? How are you able to steal that busyness of the world and hear? And I think COVID-19 is a great time for you to do that because you're forced to be at home and you're forced to listen and hear. Yeah. So
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm conscious we've exceeded the time, but I think, Lawrence, if you're okay, we can keep going because I think everyone's very happy with the engagement and there are still many more questions to be answered.
maybe, yes.
Okay, so I have one question from Richard Ewan. How did
Yes.
your experience feel like when Jesus opened your eyes?
I mean, like I said, the very specific moment was the meeting of with Pope Francis. I was stunned and I didn't expect that. And I think that experience stayed with me. I remember Pope Francis once gave this interview when he realized that he was going to be made the Holy Father. And he suddenly felt this clarity and certainty of what to do. And before the crisis, I must say that I was always searching, like jumping around like rabbit, I no longer jump. I'm very calm. And that clarity of tone, that calmness in the storm stayed with me until now. And of course, that I would say is really the difference. I would say if you were to ask how do I feel when God opens your eyes, I think it's like the blind man that Jesus healed. And he not only had joy, but he had peace. And that's the feeling I can say that I have peace. And it's such a clear sound that it never left me. Yeah.
Okay. I have another question from, just a minute here. Trillion. Thanks, Lawrence. You are so inspiring. What advice would you give to people who work in a secular organization to still have our faith, live our Catholic ethos, and have courage to speak up when things don't look right, especially at work with peers or bosses?
Yeah, thank you, Trillion, for the question. I think it's extremely important to realize that this is what I share with the youth of India. Actually, they're not very young. Some of them are 35, and some of them are in some of the largest companies in India. One of them works in the Prime Minister's office in India. And just to say that there is a reason why you are placed there. If you are the head of marketing, if you are the head of policy, if you are the strategic advisor, there's a reason why you're placed there. And rather than seeing your environment is not Christian, or rather than seeing that your environment is so secular and bad and toxic, even because some of them are saying my environment is toxic. I work in one of the biggest banks in India. Look at it as from a point of view that you are blessed, and that's the reason why you are there. If it is toxic, if it is secular, that's why you are there. It's like Jesus said, you're the salt of the earth, the light of the world. Thank God you are there, and you should be there as best as you can. But how can you be this light? Do you tell people I believe in Jesus and please follow me? No. You are only the light if you are useful. So if you are illuminating in your answers in meetings, you are helpful to your colleagues, but you're helpful not just in a competency level. You are competent, that's why you are there in such a high position, but you're competent with wisdom. I remember one of my friends in the Focolare, he works for one of the largest conglomerate in Samsung. He said that in his company, the culture is always shouting and drinking, and he doesn't join those drinking matches. And even though he's a very angry person, he understood that the way to love and to be the light is not to shout. So he has this peace zone, That means if something screw up in the production line and somebody is coming in, he's about to shout. He mentally projects his stable space as this is a peace zone. Whoever comes into this peace zone, I cannot shout. That's what he did. And I found it so useful. And he said that every time he managed to go into the peace zone mode and he speak calmly to the other people, the other colleagues started to be more willing to share their vulnerability and more willing to share what really is the problem with the supply chain and why this is not being fixed, right? And because of that, the bosses thought that he was best able to manage people with such a unique way of calmness, they kept promoting him. So there is actually a very reliable formula for career progression. Be as faithful and be as identical to Christ in whatever you do, right? But you see Jesus in his ministry, it always impressed me that every single time the gospel comes, Jesus showed by his calmness, Jesus showed by his example. He didn't all out go and said, believe in me, and all. No, he talked gently, he gave solutions, he showed people the way, and he was always on the move. And I think that life of Jesus as a worker in the midst of the world, extremely useful. And I've seen even some of the people I advise, they try to do the same. They are seeing immediate effects about being the calmness of Christ, being the light of Christ, not by projecting our identity. Hey, am I Catholic? These are my values, right? I'm not going to do this. No, but to be a useful instrument with wisdom. Yeah, that works.
Okay. I have a question from Agnes. Hi, Lawrence. How do you plan for sustainability in your business? You mentioned grooming leaders as one.
Okay, thank you, Agnes. We do it in three ways. Consulars is a horizontal network. That means there's Singapore, there's US, there's Slovakia, there's so many other countries. So we actually allow leadership by succession. That means any of the partners from all these countries, they can be voted, they can be elected. We also, so that's one, we updated our constitution to allow that. Number two, we have a global chairmanship. Again, by all the different 16 countries we rotate. So Singapore cannot be take the job of the global chairmanship because we are really holding the chair, the CEO role. So we rotate that. This year, our chairman is Jim Feng from the US, and because we postponed our annual meeting, so he has to serve for 2 terms. Yeah, for the very first time. So that's one. Number three is in our constitution charter in consulars. We a few years ago we sat down for a week to debate about who we are, what constitutes our thinking, our behavior. what we believe in, and how we believe in needs to be articulated in business model and business policy. So that guides us. Like for example, as an Asian consulting firm, right? The tendency is always you set up the firm and you hand it over to your kids. In some cases, many small consultancies do that. We decided not to. It's going to be based on merit, and we do have a classification system on the consulates. We call the consultants and consulates that they have to be of a certain level before they qualify for leadership succession. And of course, every year we spend a 1 week we call the annual school. We have leadership meeting, we have the training. We have already codified our thinking, our methodologies for over 10 years. So that's a rich treasury of how we operate, how we run projects, and the beliefs. More importantly, the values-driven beliefs, they are codified. And we, like for example, this year, the theme for the global school is about our relationship with customers. But again, for concerts, we don't have customers. We see them as partners in shaping a united world. So I think from the aspect of business design, a business model, from the aspect of values codification in the real charter document, from the way we arrange the leadership succession, and from the way we have ensured that we have diversity of leaders, very, very good people, very smart people who are also purpose-driven, that ensures our sustainability and business model.
Thanks, Lawrence. I'm conscious we are exceeded the time, so we'll take a 2 or 3 more questions and plan to have a hard stop by 12:30. Yeah. So I have a very interesting question from Satrio. Thank you, Lawrence. You are successful and so humble. One says humility is what the devil cannot imitate. Can you comment on this and elaborate how you can stay humble in this world that appreciates so much the pride of people?
Well, I think, thank you for the question. I think what helped me is to always remember my roots. I didn't plan out to be an entrepreneur. Remember, as I said, I think I know the Bible quite well. I wanted to be a priest, and in fact, I was very keen about that whole idea of priesthood. In fact, I told Michelle when we were going to get married, I thought about the mass hymns for my ordination. I knew which shop I would go to buy my chasuble. I knew what design of a chalice, just to say that I was so clear-headed about that. I never thought about marriage. And so if we're going to get married, it's all onto you. Yeah, that's fine. So I think because I didn't have a roadmap to do this, I knew, to be really, really honest, I didn't have a clue. And it was God who laid out the plans. I met the best people who taught me along the way. And I became successful as a consequence, not successful by myself. So, the Chinese say, 白手起家. It doesn't work for me. I cannot say, honestly, I did it on my own. I did it with friends. I did it with God. I did it with a lot of friends. So, in fact, a lot of people have been trying to give me business awards. I don't like to receive business awards because I think it's dishonest. If you go and lie to people and tell people, oh, I'm so successful because of myself, it's an absolute lie. And I hope that one day they'll give business awards to the whole team. And to recognize that an effort of such scale is not a one-man show, right? So I think that helps to keep me in check, to remember the roots, understand it's a team effort, understand it's totally from God, the inspiration and all. And like I said, have a spiritual community and have a great wife.
Okay. I have another interesting question from Anna Leong. I'm curious, how is Focolare working with other communities? That is Pope Francis Economy, the youth conference that was organized in Assisi. Or how can these good communities come together more and amplify the good works?
Yes, very good question. Thank you for that. Francesco Economy, the Focolare is one of the organizers, but the whole idea of the reason why we did that was because we wanted to really, really connect with a lot of like-minded communities who believe in shaping a better economy. In 2017, something happened to the whole economy of communion movement. Pope Francis met us, and Pope Francis literally said that if the economy of communion, inspired by Chiara, wants to be faithful to its charism, we cannot just give money to the poor, take care of the least. We have to change the rules of the social economic system. And since 2017, there's been a big explosion of all these partnerships with other religious and non-religious organizations We don't always just collaborate with Christian organizations. We also work with secular organizations. And I'm one of the contacts here for the Francesco economy. That if you want to get involved, we are also starting an economy and communion group. Again, you don't have to belong to the Focolare because the Pope has asked us to go out. Yeah, and it's really important to go out and include everyone if we really want to shake up things and change the economy. So we are on the run. We thought we were doing okay, but Pope Francis' 2017 call was a wake-up call. That is not enough, and we have to go out and unless we change the system. And COVID-19 is actually taking us from a run to a sprint. We are at this stage now. We are in a lot of Zoom conversations with a lot of different people. Like on this Sunday evening, I'm speaking to a large Christian conference in Slovakia, online of course, about what does this moment say to us as Christians and how can we help to shape a better world. And I'm sharing about the economy and communion. They also asked about the Francesco economy, but just to say that anyone here who wants to know more about Francesco economy, who wants to get involved, we are very keen to partner with anybody. Yeah, so that's our stage now.
Okay, let's do one last question before we wrap up, Lawrence. I'm conscious of time. So the last question is from Trillian. Hi, Lawrence. As CBN wants to inspire faith at work, what areas do you think CBN can look into to serve our community better in the area of work and business?
Here's some proposal to Arrow. I think, frankly speaking, if you look at our diocese, our catechism is geared towards values in life, but not geared towards values in a professional life in Singapore, or values in a professional life. We can argue that when a student goes into higher education, junior college, poly, and what you call university, they actually start to think about their careers. We don't have that in a very clear form and fashion. And from the parishes, I think that the reason why people leave after graduation, and what I mean by the perceived graduation is confirmation, Archbishop has told us many times that's not graduation, that's a start, but people don't get it. It's because a lot of youth don't see a point because there's no content, there's no mentorship ability, there's nothing for them to connect that anything in church is going to be useful to them. Everything is so parish-centered. Okay, after you finish confirmation, maybe you can join the warden, you can join the choir. But there is a huge opening for them the moment they finish confirmation, and we are not in that moment to help them and guide them. My wish for CBN is that if CBN is able to bring the full force of the challenges of professional learning, living into the parishes and give the parishes this additional bridge to form young professionals at work, to young entrepreneurs at faith, to form these cell groups to support them so that there is this possibility to enable the parish to generate life. I think that would be pretty amazing because we are losing Catholics, not because Catholics are not interested in faith, but a lot of Catholics don't know that the faith is so useful as an instrument. So I think the posture that Pope Francis has been trying to push all of us to understand is that God and church is not, how to say, in the air, in the sky. No, God and church is here. And I love the image that Pope Francis said, we are a field hospital. So how can we make every parish feel like they are a field hospital and they are connected to the world in a very concrete way? They learn about instruments of when you study, when you try to plan your careers, when you try to find the job, when you come out as a professional leader, how do you act, how do you live, and how do you do? I think that would be interesting if Catholic Business Network, I know it's a tall order because you need a lot of support, but I think that there is a huge vacuum, there's a huge gap that doesn't allow, I was fortunate because in the Focolare, there's a natural progression. If you leave the youth group, they start to introduce you to the different vocations, right? Whether you're going to be a priest, whether you're going to be married, whether you're going to be a professional, they teach you, and then you discern. Nobody forces you, nobody tells you. They say it's up to you. So I could progress and I could stay in my spiritual community. But I know a lot of young people, after confirmation, join the wardens, join choir. I don't know how to sing. I don't like to collect money. You know what I mean? So we need something more useful and substantive as instrument, not so much as identity as Catholic, but Catholics as useful Christians in the workplace. Yeah.
Okay, I think we've come to the end of the Q&A. We've overshot our time, but Lawrence, thank you very much. That was a real
Thank you for
inspiring
inviting me. Yes.
sharing, and the Q&A also has inspired many people. We still have many more questions. So what we'll do is we'll take that offline and answer it with you, and then circulate it back to all the people later on. Yeah. So thanks again, Lawrence. So I'm going to just make a few announcements. Okay, I hope you can see the slide. We just recently had launched a Lenten retreat during Lent online, done by Father Colin Tan, our spiritual director. We still have this resource available on our CBN YouTube. So, and it's broken down into 3 bite-sized sessions. So you can, during this circuit breaker period, you could view this at your own leisure and time. Yeah. Upcoming events. The biggest one is our golf event. God willing, we can do this on the 25th, 4th of July. This is our annual networking and fundraising event. So please help us in any way you can with sponsorships, donations of any kind. We are also, we've just relaunched our career counseling program, and it's now available online on Zoom. And I can tell you the response has been very good during the circuit breaker period. So please go to our website if you need this service, or pass this message around that we are available to do this service on Zoom during CB and beyond. Yeah. And lastly, we've just launched CBN Marketplace, which basically is our effort to help Catholic businesses that are struggling during the COVID-19 period. So we're going to try and do more on this front, but this is just a recent initiative that I wanted to share with you. And finally, as you know, CBN is a self-funded organization. We need your support to continue these programs, especially the digital programs, which involve us having to spend some money. So please help us with your love offerings. You can do bank transfers, you can do checks, or you can even do pay now, which is the easiest way to do it with using our UEN number, or open your bank app and scan to pay using this QR code. So I'll leave this slide up for a while. And if you have any feedback on this event, or any suggestions or any comments, please email us at admin@cbn.sg. Once again, I'd like to thank Lawrence for all his efforts to make this happen. I would also like to thank my colleague Pim and Lawrence's colleague Cannon for all the technical effort that they put in to produce such a beautiful event. And lastly, I'd like to thank you all you attendees, for the time that you spent with us on your Saturday morning. And I wish you a good weekend and the Lord's blessings. God bless you, and thank you very much.